Well, when I started law school, I had made a decision at that point that I wanted to be a trial lawyer, not necessarily a prosecutor or a defense attorney. And in the middle of my second year of law school, an opportunity came up to become an intern in the Kansas City prosecutor's office. So I spent the next year and a half of law school training as a prosecutor and ultimately becoming a prosecutor. So once you had the job, it was a good thing to keep. But in the middle of that internship, my father died in an industrial accident, and it happened to be at the same time my mother had been the victim of an aggravated robbery. And she was actually at court preparing for her testimony when she received the news about my father. And so I was very closely working with my mother, and that in the months that followed and her experiences with the criminal justice system, that made me realize that I had the most to offer and could best help people by continuing as a prosecutor. And I did that for the next 10 years. And at that point, I decided to take a break and try civil work. And I did that for 5 years and realized my heart was back in prosecuting. And this is my 20th year back in the office since I left prosecuting. I was always fascinated with history and the legal system and the idea of being a lawyer that you could help people. And so that was my motivation to go to law school. And ultimately then my initial thoughts were maybe I could be a criminal defense attorney and help people. But what I found and through my experiences is a prosecutor is actually the person who can bring back hope to someone, who can find justice for them, who can show them that their life matters. Oh, and going over 30 years in a prosecutor's office, actually over 30 years if you count when I was an intern, the best part is probably seeing a case all the way through and hearing with a verdict of guilty, a victim in the back of the courtroom, just that sigh of relief that they knew that someone stood up for them, someone fought for them, someone believed in them. And there's no greater reward than to have a victim come up to you and just say thank you. I think the most difficult thing about being a prosecutor is when you know that either based on the law or based on not actually exhausting an investigation, but individuals who won't cooperate, people who don't want to come forward, people who believe that snitch mentality that you can't tell on someone else, and to just know that someone deserved to be fought for and you didn't get that day to fight for them. And I think that's probably one of the most heart-wrenching things is when you look to a family and you say, we know what happened here, but we can't take this case because we don't have any witnesses that'll be able to take the stand. So again, not giving them their day in court, not giving them their fight for justice that they all deserve. If I try to look through 30 years of prosecuting and see any cases that stand out, there are quite a few, whether those be death penalty cases that we were successful with putting someone on death row, which then makes you look back and say, is this the system that we should have or not? Again, looking at the fairness, making sure we did the right thing all the time. Other things I may look at is, I've had cases over 30 years that I was not successful on, and looking and saying, what did I need, or what advancement in science do we have today that back in 1990 would have changed the outcome of a case? So again, those cases, there are other cases, like the Doug Prade case, looking at that while I didn't try that case, years later I was involved in the post-conviction hearings, and again, standing up and fighting for the evidence that was originally used at trial, and having the defense basically throw everything, including the kitchen sink, at us there to say that we didn't have enough. And finally seeing the courts and the courts of appeals look through and say, this was fair, this was right. and knowing that you can fight and you can fight for what's right, and in the end, it does stand there. I think the biggest misconception that the public might have about prosecutors is they're not aware that we're the only attorneys in the entire justice system that have the obligation to do what's right. The Supreme Court of the United States came out and said defense attorneys, they're allowed to lie, they're allowed to mislead, they're allowed to pose questions that they know are not true. But a prosecutor always has to stand for what's right. So our job is to follow the rules and make sure we don't bend them. To make sure that if we look in a case and we say, oh my God, that piece of evidence shows this person didn't do it, that we then go in and say, I can't prosecute this case. And the fact that when you see a defense attorney, again, throw everything at our cases that they know and we know is not the truth, that we still stand there under those principles that we are right, we have to do what's right, and if we don't, the case is done, the case is over, and someone walks free based on our mistake. So just the importance and the weight that is on each one of our prosecutors to know that you do what's right under all circumstances. And I don't think that the general public, when they look at a prosecutor, thinks about that and thinks that this guy has to tell us the truth, but their counterpart doesn't.